Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of The Night Shift. It's a creepy little podcast we have where we discuss anything true, false, scary, creepy. We review horror movies. We talk about true crime stories. Talk about cryptids, ghost stories, true or false. We talk about creepypasta stories, if you know what those are. So, yeah. And on the first episode of The Night Shift, I talked about my two true ghost stories that happened to me. One just recently and one a while ago, about 3-4 years ago. And I figured, I should talk about ghost stories that other people have told me that I know are true, or at least I know they weren't lying. They may believe it's true, but they may not be true, actually. As you've noticed, we've uploaded our first episode of Supernatural Skeptics, so you can tell we don't believe in ghosts, Scruffy Links and I, but if we see ghosts, or see proof of ghosts, we will believe in ghosts. But for now, we don't. But these are stories that I know they weren't lying. And usually I can tell when people are lying when they're telling a ghost story, because if they're lying, it's usually like a Hollywood-esque, very horror trope kind of ghost story, like I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw her standing in the middle of my room with a white dress on and her hair draped over her face and she yelled in a ghostly voice, "Get out!" and like all that shit. I know that shit's fake. I can tell when they're lying. But these paranormal stories, and there's two actual UFO stories in this too. One of them's my UFO story, which is kind of funny because it turns out it wasn't a UFO. But anyways, all these paranormal stories are not lies. Whether they're true or not, whether they're actual ghosts or actual UFOs, that's for you to interpret. But I have some ghost stories for you that I've learned over the years and heard over the years from friends. Some are shorter than others, but they're all not lies. So I'll start off with my friend Sarah. She told me this a long time ago when I was like 10 years old, back when I did believe in ghosts, or at least was 50-50 on it. And she wasn't scared of this ghost because it was a ghost of a friend of hers. But I thought it was creepy. But basically, she moved into a house where her family friend had just recently passed away. He was an old man, but they knew him. They were family friends. And they were eating dinner one night, and the phone was downstairs. And they're eating dinner, and the phone went off. Started ringing. And she went down there to go answer it. Well, when she opened up the door to the basement and she looked over towards where the phone was, she saw this misty figure standing by the phone. And it kind of looked over at her, and then it whooshed over to the side of the room and disappeared. But while it whooshed over to the side of the room, the TV that was standing right next to the phone moved with the misty figure in the same direction that the misty figure was going. And she thinks it's the ghost of the old man, thinking, "Oh, it's my house, I should still answer the phone." So she wasn't creeped out. She knew it was a family friend. But that was the first ghost story. Next is a couple of ghost stories from my friend Dakota. Now, these are short ghost stories, but he believes in ghosts. He's a fan of our show, Supernatural Skeptics, which, by the way, next show on our YouTube channel will probably be Supernatural Skeptics Part 2. Or not Part 2, but a second episode of Supernatural Skeptics back in my old work building. But anyways, there's this building, or this house, where a lot of my coworkers used to work at. I never been there. And there's a basement that's really creepy. It's called the 5th Street House because it's on 5th Street. And a lot of the people that go there believe that the basement's haunted. And there's some people who don't believe in ghosts, but do admit the basement is creepy as fuck and they don't like being down there. Well, Dakota's one of the ones that believes it's haunted. And he went downstairs one day because he had to. It was his job. He had to go pick up something. They use it like a storage room, and it's also a washing room for the residents that live there. And he went to reach around the corner to turn on the light switch, and he felt a hand slap the wall next to his hand. And like he heard it, and he felt the wind of the hand slapping the wall, and that freaked him out. And also, Scruffy Links told me one time because he's friends with Scruffy Links too, aka Lucas Schultz. But Scruffy Links also told me that Dakota once told him that he often sees a ghost of a Native American smoking a peace pipe, like an old-fashioned Native American with a headdress and all that. And I thought that was interesting because I think his son is half Native American, because the woman he had the son with was either full Native American or mostly Native American. And I thought that was interesting. Like, if ghosts are real, maybe it's a Native American trying to reach out to him, saying, hey, you're the father of one of our own, take care of him or something. I don't know. Just something I thought of. Next ghost story. This is a bit of a longer one. Not as long as the Sarah one, though. My friend Stephanie used to live at Maloney Manor here in Bay City. It's an old building, and she claims it's haunted. I've heard other people say it's haunted. People have died there of natural causes. No murders. A couple suicides that I could find online. But no actual murders, just old people dying. and stuff like that. And Scruffy Lynx used to live at Maloney Manor. And it's a creepy place, kinda, because the building is all white. The hallways are all white. It's an apartment building. So when you're walking down the hallways, it's all white doors, white ceiling, white tiles, white floor. And it looks like a hospital. And it's kind of creepy. But anyways, she claims that she was in the bathroom one day, and she had the bathroom door open, and she peeked over, and her boyfriend at the time was laying on the bed. And he was picked up, the top half of his body was picked up like he was being choked, and he was being shook. And then all of a sudden he dropped back down and fell asleep. Not his whole body floated off the bed. I wouldn't believe that. That'd be like I said, a Hollywood trope story where I'd be like, okay, she's making this up, but she was making this up. Like the top, his head and shoulders was lifted up off the bed, and he was being shook, and he landed back down. And the creepy thing was, when she addressed him about it the next night, he had no recollection of this ever happening. And she also told me about a story of this old abandoned house that she used to live by, and it used to be a farmhouse where there was horses tied up on chains. And the rumor is that you can still hear the chains moving around, even though it's abandoned, there's no more horses. And that's like the ghost of the horses moving the chains around. Which is interesting, because whenever you hear of a ghost story, it's always like the ghost of a human. You rarely ever hear ghost stories of a pet or an animal. It's usually always, oh, it's the ghost of my grandma, or the ghost of this person who was murdered here. It's rarely ever do you ever hear of a ghost story of an animal. So I thought that was interesting. Okay, my friend Robert, one of my closest friends ever, great guy, awesome dude. Love him to pieces. He, in fact, one of the ghost stories in my first episode of the night involved him. But this also involved him, but when he was a kid. He was on a bus once with his dad and a bunch of other people. And I'm not talking like a bus going on across town. I'm talking like a vacation bus where you're traveling across the country. And they were going through, I forgot what state it was, but it was like kind of like a desert landscape, and there was a plateau. And he's looking out the window, and this guy does not lie. He's, he always tells the truth. He's an honest dude. And he's looking out the window, and he sees this oval-shaped, almost cigar-shaped being craft floating out from behind the plateau. And he points out to his dad, and his dad looks at it, and kind of moves back behind the plateau, and then comes back out again, then moves in front of it, and then behind it. And eventually, they stopped the bus, and everybody on the bus was seeing this thing. And it was moving around like it was like a cigar-shaped thing. It was far away, so you couldn't tell the details of it. But then, all of a sudden, boom! And it floated off in the distance real fast. And that was it of that. So he thinks either it was a UFO of an alien, or maybe back then it was like a secret government spacecraft that we still don't know about, or at least the government knows about, but not us. He doesn't know, but that was creepy too. Now the last story, my UFO story. And I wanted so hard to believe there was a UFO. I always wanted to see UFO in my life. It was one of my life dreams. I always wanted to be like, I want to see aliens flying across the sky. Well, anyways, I was walking out one night. It was during the winter. And it was in the complex of my apartment buildings. I'm in a place where there's more than one apartment building, but they all belong to the same owners. And it was winter, and the sky was all black. It was cloudy, so I couldn't see how far away this thing was. But I was walking, and I see this red dot moving around along the sky. And it's moving, like, turning on a dime. Square 90-degree turns. A helicopter can't do that. A plane can't do that. Nothing that we know of can do that. And I'm looking at it, and it's moving all unnatural. And I can't tell how far away it was, because like I said, it was against a black sky. No stars, just a cloudy night. The moon was behind me. You could only see the moon, but that was behind me. And I'm watching this thing, I'm like, dang, that has to be UFO. The way it's moving, it can't be anything man-made. So I start to pull my phone out to record it. And as I'm pulling my phone out of my pocket, I hear these kids off in the distance laugh. And there's like this grassy field in between all the apartment buildings. And I had viewing access to that. And I look over at the kids, and they have this big controller. And they're looking at the same thing I'm looking at. I'm like, oh shit. It's a drone. I was so disappointed. I thought I finally got to see a UFO. And no, it was a drone. So anyways, that's the third episode of The Night Shift. I just want to tell you other paranormal stories that I know are true. Or at least not lies. That they weren't, the people actually believe these were true. But whether they're actually true or not, that's up to you to believe and for you to interpret. And like I said, next episode or next show on our channel will probably be another episode of Supernatural Skeptics. At my old work building, the parts of it's abandoned, and that's known to be haunted. Or it might be the Alkali, which is an abandoned building that we might go to. But it'll be either one of those. So you guys all have a great night.